parenting were as smooth as bourbon. I'm Lene.
And I'm Jordan. And this is Bourbon and Babies.
Straight up parenting
on the rocks. We're back.
Here we are again at Bourbon and Babies, and we have two amazing guests. We have Anne and Kofi here, and we are drinking a delicious drink right now.
The Bourbon Old Fashioned.
Now, you might be thinking, but wait, they've already featured Old Fashioned.
Well, we did the Man of War, which was a, hipster Old Fashioned.
So why are they coming back to an Old Fashioned? Well, here's why. Anne, tell us why.
Well, knowing this was happening, I did a little research on the internet. And through my
research, it's true, whatever she found.
This was on one article on the internet, so I know it's in fact actually true. And I read on the internet that there is a lack of acknowledgement of history of slaves or black people being involved in the bourbon industry. So I was like, I want to know about this. So dig in, click on some links, and apparently Tom Bullock in 1917 was the first African-American to write a cocktail book called The Idealist Bartender. Nice. First of all, that's amazing.
Yes.
And then second of all, he's credited with inventing the Old Fashioned.
Wow.
Tom Bullock.
Which also is my favorite cocktail.
Yeah.
I love a nice stiff Old Fashioned.
Yeah, so Tom Bullock,
I'm feeling uncomfortable right now. Nice.
That mission accomplished. Yes.
Because it's Black History Month, and we're talking about a subject tonight that is critical to all of us who live in the world.
That's right.
Which is how to talk to our kids about race.
Yes.
Because that shit is real, and it's a conversation that has to be had.
That shit is real.
It's real. Things sometimes get uncomfortable or awkward because people don't know how to address it. So we're hoping that we could, through conversation today, help people ease their anxieties around race.
Or acknowledge that it even needs to be talked about in the first place.
Right.
I think the thought that we don't even need to address it because we had a black president, or there are cool hipster books about Hidden Figures. The movie came out and we learned about these black mathematicians. So we don't need to talk to our kids that there's a history in our nation that was painful and that people are oppressed and there's systemic issues. And now, when they're 4, you might not dig in that deep. But
there are a lot of parents out there who think, let's make our kids colorblind. And, I don't see race. I'm colorblind. Well, you're not colorblind. You're blind.
There's a lot of...
if you don't see race.
There's a lot of memes and a lot of videos on Facebook of there was one I just saw this week, actually, a little white baby in the airport and a black man reading in this whole thing about, isn't it amazing how we can all come together? And my baby didn't know that there would have been anything wrong. And basically alluding to how magical is it that this black man was nice to my baby? And there's maybe more to the story. But then when that baby's 4 or 5, it's possible you could teach your kid about Ruby Bridges, or why really is Dr. King important? What was really happening? Yeah. Why is Rosa Parks? Why is it bad to sit in the back of the bus? You might think that's kind of fun and bumpy now, but she had just worked all day and her feet were tired and her back was sore maybe. So she was not allowed to because of the way she looked.
Yeah.
And kids can hear that and kids need to know that.
I really feel like it's important to have this conversation and encourage people to have these conversations. Because as you mentioned, these civil rights moments that I think we need to unpack further to help kids truly understand. In 2019, we've seen a lot of activity over the past 3 or 4 years, which helps me think we really do need to talk more about why we support certain integration efforts and making sure we understand the differences between our races, simply because it's been 60 years since the civil rights movement, and many people will say we haven't really had much progress since then. And I would dare to say that maybe there's been some regression in the past 3 or 4 years, even though there was a black president elected, simply because there's been a rise in racist behavior, racist symbols in America. And it's
You're in our hometown.
Yeah. And it's something
And this is not allegorical. I mean, this is not
anecdotal.
This is not anecdotal. I mean, this is backed by numbers and not the statistics that most people make up. This is backed by
it's backed by our real experience.
And our real experiences. And the reality is we can pretend like it's not actually happening, but there are tons of articles out there that actually say that some of the reason why we're seeing this increase is because we had a black president.
Here's why I, as a mother, want you to talk to your kids about race. In 2017, 2 years ago, we were in Carolina Beach, North Carolina. Just picked it because it seemed like a fun little place to go. And Wilmington seemed kind of hipster, and they shoot movies there, and that's cute. And we stayed in this little like second row condo. And Monday night, we're like, let's all go down to the ice cream parlor, and we have our then. Trying to do math in my head.
6 and 4-year-old.
It's 27. So 6 and 4-year-old. And someone shouts inward out at our family.
A truck drives down the road.
Yeah, a truck drives by
on the side of the road.
Yells inward at our family.
Oh wait! I'm colorblind. Are you black?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
And so to give
Well,
more,
that just changes everything.
let's fill that color
and
in
then
for this picture.
so. Do our kids hear it? Do we address it? He's really mad. I'm like nervous and worried and also mad. All right there on our little vacation in 2017. So for my kids, who our future, right? Aren't all of our kids? I believe the children are our future. Like
Teach them well and let them lead the way.
Well, it was true.
So
is there something you wanted to sing? Is this a song?
Show them all the beauty they possess.
There we go. Now we got there.
Mr. Randy Watson. Right.
Yes.
Sexual chocolate.
Real good song. That's
a good way to get that chocolate in there,
too. That's a good song. So, and what's the Michael Jackson song?
Man in the Mirror?
Man in the Mirror. I just wanted to address that was a good song too.
Yes, also.
But
hold on.
I thought maybe you're
Time
going
out.
black or white.
Right.
Much better than black and
That's-
white.
Yes.
Oh, Michael Jackson. Black or white, we don't know.
Such a good
All right.
song.
Okay, time out. We're going to come back to this whole colorblind thing. So those of you listening, don't think that we are going to tell you can't do something and not help you understand what you can do in place of it.
Right.
All right. So someone yells out the N-word. When you heard this, how did everybody respond?
I think you're stunned. So you're kind of in that disbelief state of like, did you? What,
And so,
and then I've always felt like this in marriage, being in an interracial marriage, I think you have to learn to believe people, because if you're all white, you never hear it yourself. You're gonna be like, but is that really what they said? Are you sure that's what they said? Maybe they were just teenagers that were like pranking. But so I think, as a white person, you can relate to how people wouldn't believe that that's really what happened.
Yeah.
But then you're there, and not only is that my husband, those are my kids.
Right.
And
So how did you react?
Just stunned, and tried to read Kofi's energy and see.
And Kofi, how did you
And
react?
I think the girls, we just didn't tell them. I don't know if they understood, so we didn't explain it.
There's like 3 things happening quickly in my brain. First, wow, someone just lobbed that grenade while they're driving. They needed to do that. Did that affect my kids? I don't think it did. Are there any rocks nearby? Can I pick up a rock real fast? I can try and hit that truck before it gets too far away.
Yeah.
Give them something.
Yeah,
man.
And then the third thing is like, wow, like what jerks? Like you are in 1 second of my life. Like you just see me on the side of the road. And you're like, I got an explosive word. I'm going to throw it out my car and just keep driving.
And I will
you
tell
deal
you-
with it. And that's what I was thinking. I was like, I'm having this awesome moment with my family, and you have the power to just throw that in and drive away.
I don't know if this is the thing people do, but like when we're in places, and I don't know if it's ever a thing that we've consciously ever talked about, but we'll be like, Brown in town. Like if there are other black people,
Yes.
it's exciting. Like, yes, you know.
Do your kids notice this?
I believe they have. We had a really
Very colorful experience in the south side of Chicago. My mom still lives in Chicago. And so we go there frequently. And it was a summer trip. And
so we stop at the Jewel Osco, the Kroger of Chicago. We're on the south side, and I want to say it's 90-something in Stony Island.
it's deep in the south
And
side.
Kofi gets out to go into the Jewel, and this was before the North Carolina trip. So the youngest, who was maybe 3 at the time, was like, "Why is everyone brown? You're the only white person." And I don't even know if she actually said white, because I don't think she knew white yet. But like, you're the only light person or peachy person or something. And I was like,
Yes.
yes. And I think we even got into a conversation like, Have you ever been the only brown person when it's all white people? You know, we started like just to have those conversations. But sometimes I will be honest, I'm kind of in shock when these things happen, and I'm trying to kill time, like, and process that this is a conversation.
Can we just wait till your dad gets back so he can help?
What? Or like I'm a bad like recreator. Like if he was here, he could tell the story better. But yeah, they completely noticed that entire parking lot and everyone going in and out was not like mommy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And was like them. Which was awesome.
Yeah.
And for me, yeah, it was one of the first times ever where knowing that they're multiracial, that they could identify with the brown side of themselves.
Right.
They're like, we're not saying when your kids are 2 or 3, you're like, there's racism, kids.
Right.
You know, but just addressing that, like, all bodies are different, and it's hair and it's skin. And one thing that I'm real big on, like parenting rules, and one of them was you only ever say something about someone's body if you're saying something nice. And there are going to be other things that you notice that you might not understand or be sure about. Mm-hmm. But if you want to say, I like your hair, or your eyes are pretty, you say it, even if your brain goes, I'm thinking about that. You only want to talk about someone's body out loud if you're saying something nice. So that could be race, that could be body, hair, you know.
Let me ask you a question. So I was reading an article earlier, and it was talking about how we as parents can get uncomfortable with our kids when they start identifying people based on things like, oh, well, the black guy over there,
yes.
or the white lady over there.
Yes.
And we all sort of like freeze up and go, oh, you're really supposed to say that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just calling it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're saying peachy or peachy red or brown. But what's the approach to that?
Yeah, that's a good.
I feel like it's fine.
It could be fine, and it also like try to get at what have they heard that? Like, are they hearing that, and that's why they do it?
Well, I'm guessing so, because
you know?
our daughter, for example, she never really explained. When I would ask her to describe kids at school, she would never think to talk about their skin
color.
tone.
No, she
It
always
just
says
never
the color
came
of their
up.
hair, the color of their eyes. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that is. Because that's such an obvious thing, you know.
Well, I think if your
someone's
kid's
description.
school is diverse a little bit enough.
Oh, it's very diverse.
Then there's so much that how do you even describe the differences versus if it's a homogenous group and there's the one kid who's brown, whether Indian or Asian or black, then it's easier to say that the brown kid,
right.
you know. So I think kids here repeat what they say. So if they've heard shows or people or parents saying that black guy or that black person, and some people that might not, like Kofi said, be a big deal if they have good hearts and good intention about it and they're not being mean. Our girls, we raise them as black, right? Because that's how the world's going to see them. But really, their identity is going to be their identity as they grow up and how they choose. If they want to check all the boxes, they're welcome to check all the boxes that apply to them. And I want the world to be able to respect that. But I know that if they're in social situations or in retail situations or whatever in their life, on vacation, that the world may see them in a certain way. And I also want them to be prepared for that. It makes me a little emotional.
This brings us right around to, okay, why is it bad to raise your kids, quote, colorblind?
Yes.
Well, why is it? I think a simple way of me addressing why it is because then if they're approaching it in a colorblind mindset, they won't be able to embrace the differences and realize, oh, there's a difference and there's a story behind that difference. And the difference is all right. I think when you're trying to do the colorblind, you think by not addressing race that you're making everything equal, but you're making it more complex actually, because unfortunately there is difference and there is inequality. Mm-hmm. And in order to really navigate it accurately, you need to understand that there is difference and why there is inequality.
And it's okay to share that there's an important history in our nation. Right. One of the easiest ways we taught our kids, and we come from a point of privilege, we were able to take our kids to the Indianapolis Children's Museum, and they have a whole section on Anne Frank, Ruby Bridges, and Ryan White. So this whole section in the Indianapolis Children's Museum is all about kids who, I don't even know how I would word it, like endured or struggled through an experience or a cause. Anne Frank, obviously in the Holocaust, for people who might not know that. Ruby Bridges, through civil rights, integrating
into
the
a white school
after Brown versus the Board of Education.
Was it Alabama, Mississippi?
That's a great question. I'm not sure, but she has the protesters like around her yelling, like very well dressed white people holding signs that say N-word, horrible stuff. And she marches into school. And then Ryan White had AIDS Ryan White had AIDS in the 80s in Indiana, and we were there one of the busiest times over the holiday break, and it was hardly anybody in there. Because you know what? You have to have conversations with your kids when you're in there.
Yeah.
And why is it important? What happened with Anne Frank? That's a big story.
Right.
Ruby Bridges, what happened? Big story. Ryan White. One time when we left, my older daughter, who was probably 6, and we explained that he had something in his body that people that made him sick, and then people were mean to him about it, and it hurts his heart, you know. And however I explained it, and as we were driving home, like an hour later, she's like, Mama, did Ryan White have friends? I'm like, what? You little empathetic soul. Right. And we talked to our kids about it. Right. Like, we just talked to them about it. And we talked that people are hurt, and I've taught a lot of bullying workshops and classes in my life. And what does a bully want? What does a bully want?
They want power and dominance.
Yeah, power and control.
Yeah.
And maybe why, and why? Why do they want it?
Because there's something that hurts in their
heart.
It
hurts inside of their heart, which is real easy to explain to a kid.
Yeah.
And we all have sad in our hearts sometimes. But you can say, no, I don't like that. And in our history, that's happened. And Ruby Bridges is someone who was able to stand up and was really brave.
I think that you're absolutely right. We get a little too worked up about, is this going to be awkward and are we going to screw it up? But the reality is, if we talk about it regularly enough, we can dilute some of the awkwardness, because now it becomes a conversation. And I love what you were saying about, you know, why it is that it's important for people to not be colorblind, because the world is going to treat people differently regardless. And for us to pretend like that doesn't exist and that doesn't happen contributes to the problem.
Yes.
So what we have to do instead is explain that these bad things have happened in history. And we have to help our children understand that there's a reason why racism is still a thing. And that we don't want to contribute to that.
Amen.
I wanted to ask a question, though, because we've been doing Black History Month at school now, and having some great lessons. But one of the teachers I teach with a lot, who is African American, she does not use race. She says that we're all part of the human race.
Okay.
And that race isn't, we're different ethnicities. We come from different backgrounds. People have immigrated from different areas of the world. And when we speak about race, and, obviously there is racism, and she describes what that means, and prejudice, and we make sure kids all know what that means as well. But when we say race, it's, at least in her view, and I, in a sense, agree, we're all human, and that's our race. We're the human race, but we have different ethnic backgrounds.
People say race is a social construct.
Yes,
but I feel like if she's acknowledging that there's been a history of oppression and violence,
which she does, because she tells stories openly about some of the things she's been through.
Then I think great to have that opinion, because you still have to have all those other conversations.
I feel
that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
And you could also say that for women. You could say that for if you're the fat kid. You could say that for a lot of things where there's been hurt and pain. Now, I'm not going to say race and being the fat kid exactly together, but being mistreated and being bullied or being hurt, that on that level it can count.
I think ideally you want to think, oh, wow, because it is a social construct, race, that we can try and change what the narrative is. And it's true. It's more about ethnicities, heritage, where your people came from. But unfortunately, the world has gotten to this place based on our understanding of race. And this is really, I feel good being able to say this based on, okay, why is colorblind dangerous? If you ignore the fact that decisions and countries and capitalism have kind of benefited due to how they position race, then you will continue to be on the outside. And
wealth was generated because people were not treated as people were treated as property and not people. I mean, that generated wealth in our nation.
Yes.
Period. Yeah, that was the start of
that
our
is
economy.
a problem.
And here's the thing. And this comes right back to why it is that we get really uncomfortable when these things come up, especially as white people. I don't know if anybody has heard of white fragility, but it was Robin DiAngelo wrote this incredible book called White Fragility, and it has like this whole long name. We'll put a link to it. But Robin DiAngelo coined the term. And what's interesting about white fragility is, to define it, it's basically when we try to talk about racism to white people, we sort of shut down because we feel attacked.
Yes.
And there's something to that. And I know because if I'm being really very honest, have been lots of times. Listen, I was born in Mississippi. Much of my family still lives in Mississippi. And I have a lot of family members that this is something that, like, if I were to say, hey, what you just said is racist, it would be a family feud that I don't know that we would recover from.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing. And a big piece of why we struggle with this is because we see it as an attack on our morality and our character. It becomes and I say our because I'm being generous here. I think that I actually feel I like having conversations about race because I recognize that I am not infallible. I have absolutely said things that have made people uncomfortable and not intended to, but it's because I said it out of ignorance. And what I want to do is always be learning. I want every day in every way to be getting better and better. And I don't know that everybody is there yet.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, we are all in this place of when you say, well, that's a racist thing, I now feel like you've labeled me as a bad person. And it's not about a good or bad person.
No.
It's about saying and doing things that are hurtful to other people.
Yeah.
And what we have to first do is be able to
Even if you don't
step back.
understand that it's hurtful to them.
Right. But we have to be able to take our ego out of it for a second and go, okay, instead of feeling attacked and shutting down and going, you know what, I'm not going to let you put that on me because I'm not a racist and automatically going into this defensive mode where you have to try and prove, but I have a black friend, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All those things that we've heard people say and that we've been guilty of saying ourselves. Instead of letting it be a personal attack, we have to go, what can I learn here?
Yeah. And to that point, I'm so happy you're helping us get to this part of the conversation through white fragility. I do feel that it's important for us to have these conversations because having these understandings will prevent color blindness and everyone will understand the differences. But more importantly, if you're feeling fragile, go ahead and hang on to that because I do think that vulnerability will help you understand more so why this is more important. But what's also equally important in the moment is that when you are being vulnerable and having this conversation with someone who is not white and we're talking about race, it's important for the non-white person to choose whether or not are they going to exercise grace in trying to help the other person understand.
Yeah.
And so often.
But that's where allies come into play too.
Agreed.
Because if it's the person of color saying, am I going to apply grace to the white person who said this offensive thing, how many times is it white people together and silence makes you complicit? And I think that's what I heard you say, like with your family in Mississippi, where there's an opportunity to say, when I heard you say,
Right.
I felt that kind of sad because I think of some of my friends who that would be really offensive to them. Like, there's a way to like pause and do that. So I think the white people who are already with black people and saying something kind of awkward is different than the white folks who are by themselves.
Agreed.
You know,
very different. But having those conversations where there is some type of mixing with races and more exploration of the vulnerability and grace, hopefully empowers those white people who have been in those conversations with non-whites to go back to predominantly white conversations and then start to share what they have learned and say, hey, let's just be more open. I'm not accusing anyone of being a racist here, but we should be talking about our views of how we interact with these others, because by not doing it, we are supporting the type of ignorant behavior that ends up hurting people and hurting their feelings and then keeping us sort of cloistered and not as integrated
it's
as
called
we can.
Tacit approval. I mean, that's what happens when you let it go on because you feel uncomfortable about even bringing it up.
And we've had so many wonderful conversations. I feel like this is a great time to piggyback on. So if we're having more conversations like this, and I'm not trying to pick on white people, but it's going to happen right now.
Prepare yourself.
White.
Don't worry, thank you. Bring it on.
You should have said, I'm not going to pick on white people.
But
pronounce the H, please.
As you talk about white fragility, there's also this concept of microaggressions. And the reason why I'm talking about this is if you're ignorant of the fact that, oh, wow, this really unique black person who has this luscious head of hair that is just so cool, I want to touch it. Touching that person's hair is a microaggression. Like,
Wait, hold on, time out. I want you to define microaggression.
Okay.
Please.
I'll try and be as simple about this as possible. But these are examples. Wow, you're a black person. You're very, very eloquent. Wow, it's awesome. Oh, your hair is so amazing.
Or, we've never had a black manager here before. Something like that. Like, what
and so the microaggression is that because you think the other person is rare or unique, you can comment on, oh wow, this is a unique thing, which actually it's not. The other person, the brown person, is probably going through that multiple times, and it's because of racism that the culture and power thinks, oh, I can compliment this very eloquent black person right now because we don't see so many eloquent black people.
Right. It's and you're very pretty for a black girl.
So,
like, what the fuck? Like,
So I'm feeling really bad now because I have all these kids who come to school and they have, this awesome hair. And like one of them came in the other day who has like
dun, dun, dun.
blue like royal blue hair that's just kind of going out everywhere. And another one came in with like pink braids.
It was crazy hair day, by the way.
No, not even today. It's just in the last month or so, and that's just their hair, whether it's natural or weave or dyes or whatever. And I just will be like, wow, your hair is amazing. And, the first instinct is you want to go and touch it because it's so unique and it's so different. And you reach out and touch
exotic.
Exactly.
Your hair.
And I obviously have been guilty of microaggression.
So
well,
now
you know.
Oh, consent culture. That's, yeah. Okay, so hold on. We got to dig into this. All right. First of all, I need to ask you a question, and it's going to sound like I'm pushing on you, but I need to understand, and I think our listeners do. For me? Yeah, please. If you'll have some grace with me.
Let's go.
I'm slapping my wrist.
If you'll give me the benefit of the doubt here and know that it's because I want to learn. All right. If saying things like this, because it's what we're observing in the world, is okay when we see our children doing it, how do we bridge that gap? I mean, one, I know they're children and we're adults and we should know better, but how do we bridge that gap between allowing our children to understand what's happening in the world and calling things as they are and talking about it, because it's not a negative thing, right? If what I heard you say earlier, Anne, was we tell our children, you can talk about people's physical appearance as long as you're being kind.
Yeah,
you're not saying something negative. So if my kid is like, oh, I love your hair, and if I say, oh, I love your hair, like help me understand how it's a microaggression.
Simply because, and that's a great question, and this is not really that hard it's not that easy to make sure you can start to navigate it successfully going forward. But it's a microaggression simply because we don't treat everyone in our society like that. As much as you may like another culture's hair, there seems to be boundaries in terms of, even though I like that hair, I know I can't reach out and touch it.
So is it the reaching out and touching it more than the complimenting?
I don't think complimenting to me is not a microaggression. I mean, like, I like your hair, your beard looks nice. I mean, things like that. That to me doesn't come off.
Because I do it just as often with other people.
And so
let's use a different. Should we use a different
example?
So
you speak
I think
eloquently.
like touching hair or like where are you from? No, where are you really from?
That is also
like
where are you really from?
Yeah, well, I just said I'm from. What's your story? I mean,
my family comes from Ghana, but
but where are you from?
I'm born in Terre Haute. Yeah,
but where are you really from?
Oh, you talking about Ghana? You talking about the motherland, huh?
No, but a lot of people aren't ready for that answer,
right?
Or they're like, I have a friend in Chicago who's like Iowa. But she's from an Indian background, but she was born and raised in Iowa.
Right.
But people can't, it's like, I do not understand this though, because I know your name and I'm looking at your body and how are you from Iowa?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like, and so I always think with the microaggression, like, you have to be able to like pause and like, well, what do I really want here?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what do I really need to know?
There's a right and there's a wrong way to try and get this point across. So if we're talking about people who speak eloquently and they're black, instead of saying, wow, you're really eloquent for a black person, say, I really like the way you talk. Because that is what you say.
Even that still feels like, what are you saying?
That's crazy.
Well,
I'd say that to anyone, though.
I think that's the thing is, would you say it to anyone?
Well, if there's certain people, like if you have an English accent, they're like, oh man, I really like the way that's
like, I love your accent.
I think that's
fine. But
fine.
you would say, because you have this experience from growing up, that like you sure talk funny.
Yes.
When you move to Georgia.
Don't you get tired of talking like a robot?
Yeah.
And that's within the black community. You hear this?
No, well, white people saying it.
White, don't you sound like a robot, or don't you get so tired? Don't you get tired? A robot, or don't you get tired of talking so proper all the time?
Because he enunciates.
Yeah. Well, it's because I was a Yankee amongst Southerners in Georgia. But to your point, yes, I do feel like I've experienced microaggressions from black people where, because of how I talked in the house that I lived in, there were some black friends that said, "Man, you must get an allowance," you know.
Oh my God!
Like, no, my dad, it's free labor here. We aren't getting paid anything. But it's funny, and I love this conversation because we are getting close to the heart of things. It's like we, as a family, have been gifted with our kids watching certain things on TV that bring race things up, that allow our kids to then talk about it. So, 2 years ago, NBC had Hairspray Live. Hairspray Live, obviously, or Hairspray, the show has its focus, where the Corky Collins show has Negro Day. And that was a very rich conversation.
And they didn't really understand that was like a thing, that would be good or bad. But when they were, however old they were, 6 and 4, we were driving to the Indiana State House, of all places. And in the car on the way, I took them out of school early. They were like, Mama, what's a Negro? Wow.
Were you in the car by yourself?
Yes, and Kofi was already up there.
I was already at the State House. Negro was the acceptable way of referring to black people up until the 1970s.
Well, and so I'm talking to a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, I think, if I'm doing my math right. So I said, that's a really good question. I was like, so I call it a history word. Mm-hmm. That's a history word. That's a word in history that was used. And I feel like we'd already talked about how people had been mean to black people at this point. But it turned out it was from Hairspray, we found out. And I said, that was a history word that people used for black. And I think the youngest one was 4. I was like, oh, I'm a Negro. Okay, this is cool. She can say that. So anyway, we get to what is integration. She asked what integration was because it's all in Hairspray. This is all just coming from watching Hairspray Live. And we talked, and then she was like, my oldest was like, is it going to be integrated where we're going? Which was crazy because we were going to the Indiana State House. Like,
so you were like, no, not really.
Like, that's what I wanted to say.
I love how educational musical theater can be.
I love musical theater, man.
And that may be the note from this episode. Hairspray could be your gateway into talking about race.
Yeah. So, and for the record, they didn't notice anything at all that like Tracy was juicy and that would be unusual that she would be on the show.
Tracy.
They didn't call him that at all.
True. They didn't
but we get up to the State House, and the Indiana State House is like a palace. It's all this stained glass and it's marble, and so they felt like we're in a castle right now. They have no idea that like bills and all that's kind of boring, right? And so we come out of the bathroom, and my then 6-year-old was like, "Mama, it is integrated in here." Like we had this whole progression that day. But then just like this last summer, we'd already talked about Ruby Bridges and all that. But my mom, who's a former teacher, got them like a real good book on Ruby Bridges. Not like just one of the little paper ones, but like a good hardback. And they can read now. And so to Grandma, the white grandma, she said, "Oh, and she reads the word because it's in a real sign of a real picture of Ruby Bridges." And Grandma said, the charge.
They're protesting. They're holding
is
the
written
signs
on the protest sign, and my kid just reads it. Mm-hmm. And so my mom's like, "Listen, I just want to let you know that this happened." And we had to talk about it, but I told her she should probably talk to you. So some time passes, and I don't even remember if I brought it up. And then I'm doing her hair one day, which is its own drama. I'm doing her hair one day, and she just says, "Hey, what's N-word?" And she says the word.
She says the word.
And I'm choosing not to say it. And I tell her, I was like, well, that's a word kind of like Negro. It's a history word. But it hurts people's hearts when it's said. It can really hurt people's hearts. Now, sometimes you might hear it in a song, and there's, just like bodies in art. This is kind of like words in art, or sometimes you use like grown-up words.
That's like so smart to put it in the art context.
Yeah,
really
history
smart.
and art. And I was like, but I want you to talk to Daddy about it.
Ding, ding,
ding. Yeah, I got to put it on.
She's like, here you go, Daddy.
Take this bomb and run with it.
And to summarize what I said, I did emphasize it is a charged word. It can hurt, but among black people, it could also be a term of endearment. You can use it.
So you're going to hear it.
So you can be it. It can be used in a positive way, but just be very smart about how you think it's being used. But
I kind of remember like being in the other room because I was like, I'm going to let them have their moment. And to an extent, he basically said, you can say that though. You can say it. Kind of
Yes,
like me in the car with Negro. Like, but you can say it. And then just this October, we were in South Carolina at a Tuesday morning shopping, and they had all the Christmas decorations out. And the now 6-year-old, who was the babe 4-year-old then, like at eye level, she's like, "Oh, it's a Negro Santa." And I'm just like, yeah. But I was like, it's cool. Like, now if she would have said the other thing I said, if she would have said N-word, which I don't think she would have, I'd say, I don't think that might hurt someone's heart if you say that,
Right.
But that's fair game for me.
And I like this because I feel like it's a full circle. If you haven't either test the waters with race conversations or feel comfortable going into them, then you become nervous when your daughter in a short store says, "That's a Negro Santa." But if you know that you've had conversations and there's no malice there and you feel comfortable helping them build their understanding of why that word is that word.
Or so say the white kid says it. Did you know when I heard you say that someone else might hear it and it might hurt their heart? And so I know you know that, and there's things that like you've learned that in the movie, but we would probably call it, I don't know if you would even go there with this one, but like Black Santa's fine. Black Santa's great.
Yeah.
Like magical Santa. I love it.
And I have seen white kids between ages 3 and 6 say, "The black guy over there," blah, blah, and that their parents cringe, and I'm like, I'm sorry, it's a descriptor, it's an adjective. Right. Unless you've been saying some bad things about black people.
Do you feel guilty because?
You should help the kid. It's fine.
As a white person, I feel like I've never been taught, like, how am I supposed to identify someone who is black?
Is it
supposed to be black? Is it supposed to be African American?
If you're trying to be in 2019, and I should say from 2000 to 2019, if you're trying to be the most respectful, it seems like African American
person of color
is the way to say it. Mm-hmm. To me, if you're chill and cool, you're just going to say black. I think it's fine to say black. I don't think black is racist. I think it's fine.
It's a descriptor.
And then ultimately, it's building relationships and meeting people where they are. This whole silver rule or whatever, golden rule is treat others as you want to be treated. The silver, the platinum rule, and I always get them mixed up, is treat others as they would like to be treated.
Right.
So meeting people where they are and finding out what they prefer, because it's going to be different. Not all black people or African Americans want the thing. But from a diversity thing, putting the person first is like one of it. That was
person of color.
Yeah, person of color, person with a disability, person. Right. Putting the person first was supposed to be.
I'm learning.
Wow.
I want to go back too, because when Jordan asked that about like, is it appropriate to say black guy? I mean, I'm just being incredibly real here. Mm-hmm. There are times when I'm trying to describe someone and I will avoid at all costs mentioning their skin color, because I am so afraid that it's going to sound like I'm making all sorts of other assumptions because of that.
I'm sad that people have that apprehension, but at the same time, I think it is good. I don't think it's good that you have that fear, but I think it's good to challenge yourself to find other ways to describe that.
I think it's fine. Yeah.
I want to make sure we cover, what do we say to our kids about race?
That it exists.
It exists.
Yeah.
We don't want to promote color blindness. We want to promote color fairness.
Color awareness.
Color fairness, color awareness. How do we do that? We want to explain.
There's all these books now that like, peace is a river. I want, when that movie, and I already referenced it once, Hidden Figures came out. First of all, how did none of us ever talk about that when we were growing up in history? That like these black women were the computers, and they was like,
I was like
totally segregated. Why did we never know that? But these women were so bright and so smart, and so that representation that my daughters now get to see, white kids should see that. So that's something that like reading, and it's not just like reading the book because there are brown people, but then like being able to say, and people were mean, like being able to also say, how we say people's hearts were hurt, or however you say it, depending on their age, that's okay to talk about. Just acknowledging that it's okay. And diversity and inclusion to me is a practice. You don't like read a book once, go to this museum once, get in an interracial marriage.
And that's the only way we get past white fragility, is acknowledging that there is something to be learned here. And listen, I get it. I am just as guilty. I'm going to be real here. I mean, I was having a conversation with some friends of ours the other day about this whole like gender, which gender are you, and everything, and people who are identifying as they and them. And I was trying to talk about these people, and I kept messing it up, and I got really frustrated, and I said, God, this is exhausting. And my friend looked at me, and because she's a great friend, she said, well, I mean, imagine how they feel. Like, it's exhausting to you, but imagine how they must feel,
Amen.
honestly feeling like they don't fit in. And she said, but because you come from a place of privilege, I felt attacked by that, like privilege. Like, I immediately went to that place that I think a lot of us go to when we talk about race, where I felt like I needed to defend myself. And it took me a few minutes to really take a step back and go, okay, what do you actually mean by privilege? What you mean by privilege is that this isn't the world you have to actually live in. It's not. And for you to jump and say, God, this is exhausting, or I don't want to have to try so hard, or you're being too sensitive. Why should I have to care so much about whether I'm saying the right pronoun, or whether I'm whether I'm saying something that's a microaggression? It's really easy to dismiss it and take the easy way out and say, I shouldn't have to try so hard to live in the world. Like, can we just coexist? Sure, we can just coexist, and we can continue to coexist in a racist world.
I was at a diversity training in December, and there were many people of varied backgrounds who spoke living in a world where they are not in the privileged space, and how exhausting that is. One of the best examples I've ever heard is, can you go into a store and buy a greeting card with someone who looks like you or you love on it? And that could have been race, is still race, could be body, could be gender and sexuality now.
Right.
You know, can you have a picture of your family on your desk at work and feel safe, or you're not going to lose your job?
Right.
Whether that's interracial, especially, I mean, interracial marriage was illegal until 1967 in our country. And I agree that, like, it's so humbling to think that would be exhausting for someone. It it makes me kind of sad.
I mean, we experience a little bit because we're Jewish. There are times where I have, like, a Star of David necklace that I will wear, and there are times I won't wear it to certain meetings, because I recognize that there are some people that's going to make them uncomfortable, and I don't want them to make any sort of judgment on me, and I'm ashamed by that. I'm ashamed. If I'm being honest, I'm ashamed that I don't want to, like, wear it proud, because I'm going into a meeting with an organization or company that I know is incredibly,
it's heartbreaking,
Christian, and I don't want them to have any reason not to take me. And that is just a necklace that I can put on and take off. We are talking about something you cannot avoid, which is the color of your skin.
Well, this is a very interesting thing, because I do find that, and this is why you have to help kids not be colorblind, because they'll eventually realize there's different worlds led by the culture of those worlds. And Anne and I and other friends that I feel discomfortable with, I'll say, oh, that's a white world practice. That's a black world practice. That's a blank. World. And to your point, I find that a lot of cultures do things to help white world feel comfortable. So when you're not wearing that necklace, you're helping white world feel
right.
When I talk a certain way, when I dial down my blackness, I'm doing that to help white world feel comfortable. And eventually, if we were able to say to them, hey, look, this is part of me, but I don't want it to offend you.
It's not a matter of offense.
Or I don't want to not get the job.
Exactly.
I don't want to make you uncomfortable.
Fairness. No, it's not even. And I think
I don't
said that, but that's not what I meant.
Put a strike against me?
Exactly. It's a fairness thing. What I don't want is for you to go, do I really trust this lady? I'm a Catholic, and she's a Jew. And listen, I was born a Baptist, raised a Catholic, married a Jew. Like, I've got all my bases covered, but you don't know that. If you see me wearing a Star of David necklace, I am afraid that you are automatically going to assume that I am there to fulfill all the stereotypes that you have about that.
And if it was a fair world where we could impose and follow color blindness, then there would be no strike against you, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah. If we all did it.
And that's why you can't support a colorblind world.
Right. Yes.
Right. It's okay to be different. Like, it's the whole, like, it makes us all better. We're stronger because of our different backgrounds. And for every time you have to play yourself down for white world, or every time you have to say, do I wear this necklace or not? What else could you be doing with your spirit and time and creativity?
And Kofi, you talked to us about code switching.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes, please.
Can you just share what that is? Because I feel like that's what you're kind of talking about.
That's good, and it's going to lead to another funny story. But code switching is that, okay, in this world, the language to describe this thing is this, but in this different world, so we could make it very stark and say, in white world, I would say the very enthusiastic person over there is trying really hard to sell this product. Whereas in Black World, you're like, the hype man is really trying to push that item on people down there, you know?
Hype man.
But the real life story about switching into different worlds that kind of made me sad is my Ghanaian father was upset when I was graduating from college because I had dreadlocks. And it was the 90s and dreadlocks were really cool.
Just so our listeners know, you are currently bald.
Yes, I have no hair on my head now.
What happened?
You know,
Two children, that's what happened.
Genetics is hard, man. You lose your hair after a while. But long story short, the reason why it's deep, and back to you not wearing the Star of David in certain meetings. My dad said, in Ghana we have a saying. He said, when you stink, you don't go around farting. Kofi, you're about to go into the work world. You're already Black. Why would you have something else about you that may indicate that you're part of drug culture? You know? That's what the dreadlocks.
Or that might make it harder on you.
They will make it harder for you to get a job if you have those dreadlocks. Cut them off.
You're already
and be
Black.
more regular. If you stink, you don't go around farting. If you stink, you don't go around farting. That's African wisdom saying, hey, you're going to have to acclimate here, my friend.
Assimilate.
20-year-old Kofi had a moment with his dad. I'm like, sorry, Dad. You know, the way I've behaved and the way I've carried myself has got me to this place with my college. I feel really good. And I feel like the character that I will bring into an interview will make them see past my hair, Dad, and they will hire me.
I'm going to fart wherever I want.
That's right.
With Black Panther coming out a year ago, man, that movie really lit a fire for me. And I remember thinking, I'm like, man, I have so many African clothes that I feel makes my work world uncomfortable. What's going to happen now? And it's deep because since this movie's come out and I've felt that strength, I've worn them and people love it. But for some odd reason, I put that this is in the fart category and I already stink. So I can't be wearing my African clothes because that's just not normal.
I can't help but think, like, if you already stink, like, what damage does it really do?
Well, but do you not get the promotion or make more money or get sent out on certain clothes?
But okay,
you got to reduce the stink so you start to climb up the ladder.
So at least it's something, right?
Yeah.
We have talked about so many things.
It's a lot.
Boom, boom,
It's a
boom.
lot.
White fragility, code switching, microaggressions.
All of these things.
Color blindness.
And I want to come back to, if you had to tell us, as being the parent of kids who are in this like middle ground and they're like going to be able to identify however they want, what can we as parents do to help your kids feel at home in whatever they decide?
That's interesting.
That's a good question. I'd say the same for you, right? If your kids are Jewish.
Yeah.
What can we do to teach them that people have different holidays?
Right.
Or
Just make them feel welcome. It doesn't matter.
Like, please don't have
don't
your
hate.
kids tell my kid that they are going to
hell because they don't know Jesus.
Because they don't know Jesus, which has
Which
happened
has
already.
happened, yes.
I think teach your kids that silver or platinum rule, whichever one it is, that treat others as they want to be treated.
Baby.
Treat other people the way they want to be treated.
Yes.
That's a big change.
It is.
I mean, that's not something that
It's not you want to be
we're
treated
used
today.
to. And it's hard because it means you have to take your ego out of it. It means it can't always be about you. I think
love
that's
that
a great
story.
place to stop. Listen,
Yeah, it
this
is.
has been amazing.
Namaste.
Thank you,
yeah, that's
Anne.
right.
Thank you, Kofi, so much for having these difficult conversations with us. Here's the thing. Parents, I know that you can find yourself in difficult situations. Fight the urge to run away with your hair on fire and just let it be what it is and talk about the fact that there are these challenges in life, but we're going to do our best to be proactive and to live by that platinum or silver rule. We're not really sure which one it is, which is treat other people the way that they want to be treated. So if you're feeling nervous about having this conversation and you want to like grease the wheels a little bit, go get yourself a bottle of Jack Daniels because
Nearest Green was the man who taught Jack Daniels everything he knew. And in recent history, Jack Daniels is starting to acknowledge that history, which is really, 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 really
and this
exciting.
man was an African-American man. So if you need to grease the wheels, get some Jack Daniels, drink responsibly. And have you had some experiences like this? Have you had some hard moments? Are there some things that have happened with your kids, whether they are white or black or anything in between? Please share those with us at Bourbon and Babies Podcast or in our parenting group, Bourbon and Babies Straight Up Parenting on the Rocks. It's a fun group. You should join. Join the conversation, and we'll see you next week on Bourbon and Babies.
Peace.
Did you guys see that cool story about the mom who threw a gender reveal party for her adult son who is coming out as trans? Well, guess what? We've got both of them on the show next week tackling the subject of gender. So stay with us, and we'll see you next week on Bourbon and Babies.